Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're embarking on an exciting journey through a fascinating section of the Old Testament, the books of the 12 minor prophets. These 12 books are packed with profound messages, incredible stories, and timeless truths that still resonate with us today. Our journey begins with the book of Hosea. This is one of the most moving and personal stories in the entire Bible. God asked the prophet Hosea to marry a woman named Gomer, who was unfaithful to him. Their tumultuous marriage becomes a living, breathing metaphor for God's relationship with Israel. Just as Gomer repeatedly leaves Hosea, Israel repeatedly turns away from God to worship other idols. Yet, Hosea's story is one of radical, unconditional love. He continues to pursue Gomer, to buy her back, to forgive her, and to love her. This powerful drama illustrates God's own heart, a heart of relentless and restorative love for his people, even when they are unfaithful. It's a profound message of grace that sets the stage for everything that follows. Next up is Joel. While we don't know much about the prophet himself, his message is urgent and powerful. The book opens with a vivid, almost terrifying description of a massive locust plague. It's a disaster of epic proportions, devouring every green thing and leaving the land desolate. Joel uses this event as a wake-up call, a sign of a coming spiritual judgment, the day of the Lord. But Joel's message isn't just about doom and gloom. He calls the people to repentance, to render their hearts and not their garments. And with this call comes a beautiful promise of restoration. God promises to pour out his Spirit on all people, young and old, men and women. This famous prophecy, which the Apostle Peter quotes on the day of Pentecost in the book of Acts, shows that God's plan is not just to judge, but to restore his people with his very presence. Let's turn to Amos. Amos wasn't your typical prophet. He was a shepherd and a sycamore fig farmer from the southern kingdom of Judah. But God gave him a powerful message for the wealthy northern kingdom of Israel. On the surface, Israel was thriving. They were wealthy, powerful, and religiously active. But beneath that shiny veneer was a society filled with injustice. The rich were exploiting the poor. The courts were corrupt, and their religious ceremonies were empty and meaningless because they didn't translate into compassionate living. Amos comes in condemning their social injustice and calling them back to true righteousness. His famous cry, "Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream," is a call for a faith that is active, a faith that cares for the vulnerable and seeks justice for all. After Amos, we find the shortest book in the Old Testament, Obadiah. It's just one chapter long, but it packs a punch. The book is a prophecy of judgment against the nation of Edom. The Edomites were descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, making them relatives of the Israelites. Yet, when Jerusalem was conquered by Babylon, the Edomites didn't help. Instead, they stood by, gloated over their relatives' suffering, and even participated in the looting. Obadiah's message is a stark warning against pride and celebrating the downfall of others. He declares that God sees and that Edom will face judgment for their arrogance and cruelty. But the book ends on a note of hope, not for Edom, but for Israel. It promises that God will restore his people and his kingdom, reminding us that God's justice and sovereignty will prevail. And now for a story everyone knows. Jonah. We all know the tale of Jonah and the big fish, but the book is so much more than a children's story. Jonah is a reluctant prophet. God tells him to go to Nineveh, the capital of the evil Assyrian Empire, and warn them of impending judgment. But Jonah hates the Ninevites. They are Israel's brutal enemies. So he runs in the opposite direction. What follows is the famous storm, being thrown overboard and getting swallowed by a giant fish. In the belly of the fish, Jonah finally repents and agrees to go to Nineveh. He preaches the shortest, most unenthusiastic sermon ever. And to his shock, the entire city repents. But the story doesn't end there. Jonah gets angry with God for showing mercy to his enemies. The book of Jonah is less about a disobedient prophet and more about the astonishingly vast, surprising, and unconditional mercy of God. A mercy that extends even to those we think are our worst enemies. Let's move on to Micah, a contemporary of the famous prophet Isaiah. Much like Amos, Micah speaks out against the corruption he sees in the leadership of Israel and Judah. He condemns the rulers, priests, and prophets who are using their positions for personal gain and leading the people astray. He foresees the destruction of both the northern and southern kingdoms as a consequence of their sin. Yet, amidst these stark warnings, Micah delivers some of the most beautiful promises of hope in the Old Testament. He prophesies that a ruler will come from the small town of Bethlehem who will shepherd God's people in peace. And he summarizes what God truly requires of us: to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. It's a powerful summary of a faith that is both vertical in our relationship with God and horizontal in how we treat others. Next is the book of Nahum. While Jonah was about God's mercy to Nineveh, Nahum, writing about a century later, is about God's judgments on Nineveh. In Jonah's time, the city repented, but now they have returned to their violent and cruel ways. The book of Nahum is a vivid, poetic declaration of the downfall of this mighty, terrifying empire. For the people of Judah, who had suffered under Assyrian oppression, this news would have been a great comfort. Nahum's prophecy affirms that God is a stronghold in the day of trouble, and while he is slow to anger, he will not let the guilty go unpunished. It's a reminder that God is a God of justice, and no empire is beyond his sovereign judgment. He sees the suffering of his people and will ultimately bring justice to the oppressors. Now, we come to Habakkuk, a book that feels incredibly modern. It's not a prophecy delivered to the people. It's a conversation, a raw and honest dialogue between the prophet and God. Habakkuk is struggling. He looks at the world around him, at the sin and injustice within his own nation of Judah, and he cries out to God, "How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen?" God answers that he is raising up the Babylonians to judge Judah. This answer only confuses Habakkuk more. How can a holy God use an even more wicked nation to punish his own people? It's a profound question about God's justice and his ways. God's answer doesn't explain everything, but it calls for faith. He gives Habakkuk the famous line, "The righteous will live by faith." The book ends not with all the answers, but with the prophet choosing to trust and rejoice in God, even amid confusion and impending doom. It's a lesson in trusting God when we don't understand his plan. Following Habakkuk is Zephaniah. He was a prophet in Jerusalem during the reign of King Josiah, and he may have even been a member of the royal family. His message is one of intense warning about the coming day of the Lord. He describes it as a day of wrath, distress, and darkness, a universal judgment that will fall upon Judah and the surrounding nations because of their idolatry and sin. His language is strong and sobering, but like the other prophets, Zephaniah's message is not without hope. After the purification of judgment, he foretells a future where a humble and righteous remnant will be restored. He concludes with one of the most beautiful and personal images of God in the Bible, portraying God as a mighty warrior who saves, who rejoices over his people with loud singing. From terrifying judgment to joyful celebration, Zephaniah shows the full scope of God's character. Our final three prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, are meaning they prophesied after the people of Israel had returned to Jerusalem from their exile in Babylon. The first is Haggai. The people had started to rebuild the temple, the center of their worship, but they got discouraged and stopped, focusing on building their own nice houses instead. Haggai comes with a direct and simple message from God. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses, while this house remains a ruin? He challenges their priorities, urging them to put God first and get back to work rebuilding the temple. His message is effective. The people listen, and with the encouragement of Haggai and Zechariah, they complete the temple. Haggai's book is a short but powerful lesson on the importance of prioritizing God's kingdom and working together for his purposes. Alongside Haggai is Zechariah. If Haggai's message was direct and practical, Zechariah's is filled with symbolic visions, complex imagery, and foreshadowing prophecies. The book begins with a series of 8 strange and wonderful night visions, flying scrolls, women in a basket, and colored horses, all meant to encourage the people in their work of rebuilding. But Zechariah's vision extends far beyond the new temple. He gives some of the most detailed prophecies about the Messiah in the Old Testament. He speaks of a king who will enter Jerusalem humble and riding on a donkey, a branch who will build the temple of the Lord, and a shepherd who will be struck and whose sheep will be scattered. These prophecies, fulfilled so clearly in Jesus Christ, make Zechariah a crucial bridge between the Old and New Testaments, full of hope for God's plan of salvation. Finally, we arrive at the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi. The name Malachi means, "my messenger." The temple is rebuilt, but the people's hearts have grown cold. Their passion for God has faded into weary formalism. They offer blemished sacrifices, the priests are corrupt, and the people are unfaithful in their marriages and are withholding their tithes. Malachi's book is structured as a series of disputes where God makes a statement, the people question it, and God responds. Through these arguments, Malachi confronts their spiritual apathy and calls them back to genuine worship. The book ends with a promise that God will send his messenger, Elijah, to prepare the way before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, turning the hearts of the fathers to their children. This prophecy sets the stage perfectly, creating a 400-year silence that is finally broken by the arrival of John the Baptist and, ultimately, Jesus himself. And there you have it, the 12 minor prophets, from Hosea's painful love story to Malachi's final call to prepare the way. These books are a rich tapestry of God's justice, mercy, and relentless love for his people. They challenge us to live justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly, and to hold on to hope even in the darkest of times. They show us a God who is deeply involved in the messiances of human history, always working to call his people back to himself. Thanks so much for watching today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.